my time. I paid for my crime.
I want to say big good evening going out to each and every one of you, wherever you may be across the globe.
For my crime.
It's Saturday night at 6 o'clock and it's time for Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio. I've got another high-profile case to bring to you today. It's the wrongful conviction of Kris Helton.
Did my time. I paid for
my guests today are advocate
already did my time.
George Barwood
My crime.
and his beloved, that's Kris Helton's beloved wife, may I add,
Back in the day, I didn't really care.
Shannon Helton.
It was all about survival. It was
We're going to be talking to him in a very short while.
rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick.
Seem to be stuck on wrongful convictions. I was just speaking to George a short while ago,
The street. I was
and inundated with people who've got people who are locked up in prison for years,
range.
some of them many, many years,
No gun in my hand. It ain't
crimes that people know they didn't commit, and this is a case as such.
trying to cope with this living hell.
In fact, as we go into this case, you're gonna wonder how it ever completed
My time. I paid
its duration as a trial, let alone a conviction coming out of it.
my time.
But I'll leave you to hear the details, and you can make your mind up at the end of this show.
Paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Don't forget you can join us on www.worldjamglobalradio.com,
I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs.
or you can get us on the
Never got out my own supply.
TuneIn app, which is available on all smartphones.
Story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now
Get us on Twitter at Issues Today Radio.
I know the life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb. My brain was so numb.
issuestoday@gmail.com is the email address.
Dumb. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real
You can find us on Issues Today on Facebook,
neighbor. I
or just follow me, Kervin Julien.
like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
On a week when Trump was again told to shut up by Great Britain.
In prison.
Oh, I love that. Coming back on the back of
Already did my time.
some horrendous weather, worldwide hurricanes, fires.
Already did my
It's not been a good week for news, has it?
crime. Already did my time. Baby, my crime. Baby, my crime. Baby, my crime. Baby, my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
But once again, my name is Kervin Julien, and this is Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio, going out worldwide,
So I can get my life on
all over to internet.
and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen. Statewide, worldwide.
Don't forget, you still got time to tune in and catch me on my gospel show tomorrow morning, that is, 8 o'clock GMT.
Women and women, I had girls all
The theme of tomorrow's show is I Live For You.
sweet. Now things have changed.
Word of encouragement and some great gospel music, some brand new tracks.
Man, don't need no gun in my
That's 8 o'clock tomorrow morning on World Jam Global Radio. You can join me right there.
spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
But whatever you're doing, it's time to kick back,
I paid for my crime.
get yourself a coffee, just a couple more minutes, and we're going live.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
And I do believe our guest is going to be in Florida, but I'll leave it to tell you where she is and where she's from. And George Barwood obviously is in the UK.
I paid for my crime.
Look forward to hearing from him too.
I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my
5 minutes past the hour at 6 o'clock and moving fast.
already did my time.
It's Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio. My name is Kervin Julien,
Life.
and my guests today are George Barwood, advocate, and Shannon Helton, the wife of the case we shall be discussing. Free Kris Helton. Been incarcerated for over 25 years now. And the information you're about to hear, the discussion we're about to have, the debate that's about to take place, you'll find absolutely shocking.
Trying to cope with this living hell.
We'd like to believe that we're living in a world where justice is justice and everything is above board. But it ain't as easy as that.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
So in fact,
done on earth.
I think we've come to that time where I think I've kept my guests waiting long enough. First and foremost, I want to introduce to you my first guest. He's been with us before. He's a friend of the show, and he's a friend of Wrongful Convictions Group. He's none other than George Barwood. Shall I introduce George Barwood? George Barwood, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, Kervin.
And how are you? It's been a little while since we've spoken.
I'm very well. We spoke, I think it was back in around February, wasn't it? And we were discussing another case.
That's right. We were talking about the Coach Jason case, wasn't we?
Yes, and what's absolutely wonderful about that is that he was found not guilty on all charges.
Wow. So is he free? Is he released now?
Yeah, in March, the month after we talked about the case, there was quite a long jury trial, and at the end of it, he was found not guilty on all charges. And yes, he's now living in freedom, which is absolutely great.
That's absolutely great news, especially for the work that's been done by the Wrongful Convictions Group, etc. How long has the Wrongful Convictions Group been running now, George?
About 3-4 years or so. And we've now had 40 exonerations. Would you believe it?
Wow, that's an amazing testimony to.
I mean, what I actually just have to make clear here is just to be absolutely clear: it's a social media group.
Yeah,
it's not an innocence project. It's not an innocence project. We don't employ lawyers. We just discuss.
Yeah,
it's a talking shop, if you like. We discuss and we document. What we try to do is document, who's been wrongly convicted. So we now have a very long list. I mean, I mentioned the 40 exonerations, but I mean, we've got, I'm just scrolling down the list, 219 cases where we're waiting for people to be, people have been wrongly convicted who haven't been released. And there's another 13 who've been released but haven't been exonerated yet, and that sort of thing. So I mean, that puts it in perspective.
That's still really shocking statistics, though, isn't it, George? That's
yes, I mean,
290.
Even these ones which we're trying to identify through social media, linking up with people like Shannon. There must be an awful lot that are just hidden out of sight. We never know about.
There's obviously there's obviously the type of people that don't get involved in social media and probably not aware that there's groups like the wrongful conviction groups are about.
Yeah, there's also an exoneration registry, and that's got over 2,000 exonerations on it. So this is a massive problem. It's not, Justice Scalia, the Supreme Court justice who died a year or two ago, sort of seemed to think that wrongful convictions just didn't happen. It's not true. There's it's almost like we're drowning in wrongful convictions. It seems. I mean,
well, it's even bigger than that. I mean, I remember when Liberty were about back in the 80s and 90s, etc. I did some work with them back then, and when Liberty, I mean, a lot of people didn't believe just the sheer volume of people that were behind bars claiming to be innocent, that were actually innocent. Too many people had the belief that if you're in jail, you must have done something wrong. But although Liberty has long since been disbanded, it's been replaced by umpteen and a million other organisations that have taken its place. And I think because you haven't got a spokes organisation as Liberty, because Liberty was very much a big thing here in the UK, it doesn't mean to say that the issue has gone away. But you don't just look at cases here in the UK, though, do you, George?
No, most of them are in the United States. Most of them in the United States. I do have one or two UK cases, and maybe we could talk about one sometime. But most of the cases are in the United States,
and that's partly because our legislation, our law systems here have improved so much that it's harder to get wrongful convictions than it used to be. Right? Is that a fair point?
Yes. I don't like to say, because you never really know, do you? But I would say currently in the UK, the problem is not too bad. Judging from judging from what I see, I do see wrongful convictions in the UK, but it's a handful.
Yeah. I mean, we've got better. We've got better at it, haven't we? That's what I'm trying to say. Is we're not where we should be, but we've got better at it.
Yeah, I'm not saying there aren't any wrongful convictions in the UK, because I suspect there are, but it seems to be. I mean, of course, the United States is a huge country. It's something like 5 or 6 times the population of the UK. So you expect there to be more, just because it's a very large country. But I think there are pockets, there are states which have got dysfunctional legal systems, and especially their dysfunctional appeal systems. We'll find out tonight that.
Yeah.
There are people who have been. The only reason they're not being let out is because of some technical thing, like something was filed too late.
Yeah. Which
is just ridiculous. I mean, it shouldn't depend on whether your lawyer was a few weeks late filing your appeal. That shouldn't determine whether someone stays in prison. Yeah. For decades.
And we are going to be talking about a case just like that, with those sort of circumstances, that's going to absolutely baffle our audience and listeners worldwide, as we now introduce the wife of Kris Helton. Kris Helton. You've got to forgive me, Shannon. Shannon Helton.
Hello.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Would you do me the honour of just telling our audience who you are, where you live, because I do believe it's somewhere near Florida, or something like that, and why you're on the show, and then we'll move on a little bit.
Okay. Well, my name, as you know, is Shannon Helton, and I'm in the Clearwater, Florida area of the United States. And I've known Kris since that's Kris with a K, by the way. I've known him since he was 14.
Okay. And you're married to him?
Yes. Actually, when we met in high school at 14, we were wanting to get married back then. But of course, we were so young. And,
teen love.
Oh, yes. And then his family moved, my family moved. We lost contact. There was no social media back then. And I finally found him again in a horrible situation, which I was just shocked. I was so shocked, because he's the last person I thought would ever be in prison. He's always been so kind and thoughtful and putting other people first. And his little sister idolized him, and everybody who met him loved him, and he was always helping somebody. So he's the last person that I thought would end up in this situation.
So let's just get this clear. Although you're married to him now, you weren't married to him at the time that he was incarcerated.
No, I was not.
Okay. And so when you met up with him again, he was already convicted and sentenced for this atrocity, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you decided to. I mean, let's just get it right. Most people would run a mile from somebody who was serving such a heavy sentence for what would be considered a quite heinous crime, right?
Oh, yes. If it was anyone else, I would have ran as fast as possible. But I knew Kris, and he's an amazing man. From prison, he's put himself through 3 law colleges, some of the best in the country, from New York. He's just an amazing man. He always strives to do the right thing. A judge told him that he could not have been such an exemplary inmate in 25, 26 years' time now as Kris has been, because he's just never in trouble. He always does the right thing. I mean, a judge told him he would not be able to do what he has done. So that's just the amazing person that he is. And so as soon as I found him again, I knew, I didn't even question it. I knew there's no way that he did this crime, and I was on board, and I'm ready to fight for him as long as it takes.
Let me tell you a little bit about instinct. just from my perspective, because I come from a history of miscarriages of justice as well here. I was the chairman of the campaign for the Cardiff Three, who were three young men who were sentenced to life for a murder. And when that news was given to me, I actually wasn't in Cardiff at the time, although I'd lived in Cardiff for many years. One of the co-accused, in fact, two of the co-accused, I had been in relationships with their family members. John Actie, I'd been with his cousin Debbie for many years, and Tony Paris, his sister, was one of my first girlfriends when I actually went to Wales. So I knew those families and those individuals very well. And I remember when I got the news, I'd left Cardiff and I was back in London, and I'd heard this news that these guys had been sentenced to life for this murder. And as soon as I saw the dynamic of the group of people involved, I was like, no way. And I left what I was doing in London, and I went back to Cardiff and started the movement for the campaign to help get them released. And yes, okay, it only took us 4 years, but it was 4 painstaking years of really having to battle through some stuff. But that was instinct. Just as your instinct tells you that Kris couldn't have done this. Before I'd even heard the evidence, before I even knew what the scenario was, or who it was that had been murdered, or how they'd been murdered, and what time the murder was, or before I'd known any of that, my instinct told me straight away that could not be. Absolutely impossible. No way on this planet. I was 100% convinced before I left London to go back to Wales. And when I went back to Wales, the information that I came across only confirmed what I'd already believed through instinct. And yes, we were successful in this, and it took us 4 years. So I want to tell you, I fully understand where your instinct comes from when you know someone or you know people very well. When you hear this thing or when you hear something, you just know in your spirit, you just know in your bones that ain't right. Tell us a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about Kris, because you said that you knew him from he was 14. What kind of a kid was he growing up? What kind of games did he play? Where did he hang out? What type of people did he hang out with? Tell us a little bit more about Kris.
Oh man, Kris, he was always involved in like track or band, and always busy doing anything. Like if someone needed his help, he was there. He loved being around adults even. He's very musical. He wasn't like hanging out like the normal kids and getting in trouble and, you know, hanging out in basements or anything like that. He was always involved in sports, and he always had a goal. He always wanted to be involved in law. His lawyer actually told us that he believes that Kris would have ended up a judge had he not ended up in this situation. That's just who Kris is. He always has wanted to do the right thing and be an inspiration to people. He's been helping a couple, one of the Innocence projects, and from prison, he has helped other inmates with their wrongful convictions, and he has won over 60 cases from prison. Wow. I wish he could help himself.
I mean, you know, I bet sometimes you say, just stop helping people, help yourself. I could feel you scream. You know, you mentioned earlier on in private that his parents had passed away, but did he have any siblings? Did he have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, his sister Kim lives not far from me. She always idolized him as a child. There's pictures of him when she was in her bassinet. He would sleep under the bassinet protecting her. I mean, he's just such an amazing guy. And,
are you and his sister still in a relationship? Are you still friendly?
Well, I just now found out where she was living, and I wrote her, but I have not had the time to hear back from her. But I did find her daughter's email address, and she actually emailed me back this morning.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah.
So it's just about tying up some loose ends, and I'm quite sure that's going to work out. You knew when he was 14, and his parents may have passed away now, but at 14 you probably know what sort of a relationship he had with his parents. What sort of relationship did he have with his parents? What sort of upbringing did he have with them?
They were wonderful parents, very kind. His father was Air Force, and he did motorcycle races, and he was a mechanic, and he was involved in so many different things. Before he passed away, he was traveling, doing country music. His mother was a stay-at-home mother, adored her children. She had 5 sisters who doted over Kris and Kim, and they were a very tight family before this happened. it crushed his mother when she passed away a few years back. It's been 4 years now, I believe, and she died calling for him. So that was really, really sad. But he had a great family.
It sounds like it. And then again, as you say, that you guys were boyfriend and girlfriend from your teen days. You wanted to get married back then, but it's you were too young back then. Then you guys drifted apart. How did you guys manage to drift apart? Did you move away? Did he move away?
Well, both of our families actually moved, and we lost contact. There was no social media back then. I couldn't Google him, or and so life moved on. But I always thought about him, and I kept his. He had given me a card one year for Valentine's Day, and I always kept that card, and he gave me a stuffed bunny with it, and I still have the bunny. So I was always wondering what happened to him. How do I find him? And I would Google him, and he was never on Facebook. He was, I'm like, why isn't he on social media? Everybody's on social media. So one day I actually found him because we have the free KrisHelton.org, and I came across that, and I'm like, no way. So I sent him a letter. I overnighted it, which now I know you don't overnight things to a prison, but I didn't know at the time. But I just had to get a hold of him as fast as possible, and so the rest was history. Within a few months, he said, "You've got to marry me now," and I'm like, "Yes, finally."
Here's a question: in your absence, while you'd moved away and while he'd moved away, had you guys married other people in between that?
I had, yes.
Okay.
He had not.
So he had never married?
No.
Wow. So you had married and you'd gone off, got yourself a husband, got yourself some kids.
Yes. Yeah.
But what made you go looking for him again? What was the instigating? What was the trigger that made you want to go and find him?
Well, my heart was always wondering where he was and what happened to him and if he was okay. And over the years, I would try to look him up, and just never
was you
find him.
Was you still looking while you were married?
Probably in the beginning of the marriage, not so much. But I told my husband about him, and I wonder what happened to him, and but then at the end of my marriage, my ex, he had a head injury and it changed him and he became mean. So then I started looking for him again, and I came across the .org site and I found him, and within months, we were living in Virginia at the time. Within a few months, I packed up and sold everything and moved down here to Florida to be close to Kris, and here we are.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? So there you are, you're searching for the love of your life. You're wondering what's happened to him, right? Your previous relationship has gone funky, and
wrong.
It's gone wrong. That's come to an end, and now you're researching for the love of your life, and you happen upon him, right? Hell bent incarcerated in almost a life sentence. How does that make you feel?
Oh my goodness. When I came across the site and I saw that, I was sitting at a desk, and I'm a very quiet, meek type person, but when I saw that, I slammed my hands on the desk and I said, no freaking way, no way. And then I just started crying, and I was just so upset, and I just had to get a hold of him as soon as possible. And that's when I overnighted the letter to him. And I just was in shock, because he is the last person that would have ever been in any trouble whatsoever. I'm in shock that he's even in this situation, even though I've been dealing with it now for 3 years with him. It's just a lot.
Just 1 second. I just want to bring George in for a minute, because this story touches me very much. But George, you'd have expected a woman's looking for her lost loved one. She hasn't seen him in donkey's years. She's been through one relationship. That relationship's ended, and now she's in search. Right? She's got high expectations. She's got her understanding of the type of man that he is a good quality man, and she happens upon him on an incarcerated site for what anybody else in their right mind would consider a heinous crime. Isn't someone's first instinct, oh gosh, I better run 100 miles in the other way?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think what Shannon's talking about is I think she came across this website, Free Kris Helton. I mean, I think we've referred to it once or twice actually already. So that's KrisHelton.org. And the site does make it pretty clear immediately when you go to the site that he's been wrongly incarcerated. So I don't think Shannon would. I think Shannon would have been shocked that he was incarcerated, but I don't think she would have thought, "Oh gosh, he really did this."
Okay. Oh no, but
the site's very well together. So.
I was so in shock when I saw it. I actually didn't even read through it because I was like freaking out that he was incarcerated. I didn't even read the facts or what was happening, or I was just like, no. And then I found an email address in the .org, and I emailed who is his stepmother now, and she got back to me right away, and I was just in shock.
Wow.
Right.
It was when you went in search of your lost love, it was obviously the last thing that you was expecting was to find him locked away somewhere where you couldn't actually get at him.
Yes.
Okay.
And then she told me that he had been trying to find me as well and didn't know how to do it from prison.
Wow. That's a whole nother movie there. That's a love story waiting to be written, and a song waiting to be sung. But here's the thing now. So you found him now. You've made contact. We've got an understanding of the type of guy that this guy is, and I think we've investigated that well. What I want to now talk about is the crime that he was accused of and sentenced for. So let's talk about that. What do we know so far? I don't know whether you want to start or George, you want to start. What do we know so far?
Do you want me to take you through this
yes.
Kervin? Because I've got a pretty accurate description.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go, George.
So Kris Helton was convicted in 1992 for the murder of 22-month-old Marshall Gunderson. At the time of Marshall's death, Kris was living with Marshall's mother, Marcella Gunderson, and her 3 sons, including Michael, Matthew, and Marshall. Okay, so that was the situation. And what this is, it's a time of death case. I mean, it's all about what time Marshall actually died and how did he die. So this is a 22-month-old child, so what can we say? Possibly toddling. And I suspect he probably died in an accident. But what's so interesting about this case is we can tell from the stomach contents what time he died. Because he'd had a meal, according to his mother, he'd had this meal earlier, sort of early in the evening. I haven't quite got the exact time here, but something like 6-7 o'clock. And when you look at the stomach contents, nothing was digested. There was things like rice particles in his stomach that mean that he must have died within an hour or two, at the very most, of having this meal. And nobody disputes that Kris didn't actually come back home till 9:30. And the prosecution are saying that he died around midnight. He was rushed off to hospital. He was found outside, rather curiously, strangely, he was found outside the front of the house, I believe, lying on some gravel. He was rushed off to hospital. And it was clear to the medical staff immediately that he'd been dead for many hours. So just the facts of this case show that he couldn't have, he died much, much earlier in the evening and before Kris was even home. So Kris could not have been responsible for his death. And I think what Shannon will explain is that his mother was troubled. I don't have the exact details, but I think she was very troubled. I think there was probably some kind of accident. We can't really tell. He had a single head injury, so it could have been a fall, maybe who knows? Maybe they were playing some game. Maybe she was swinging him around or something, and he caught the table, or who knows. But I think what happened is that she was afraid to, own up to what had happened, and she then basically started to transfer the blame onto Kris, who came home later. And eventually, they found the child outside on this gravel. Was rushed to hospital. He was already dead for a long time. And what happened at trial is that this medical evidence wasn't brought out. His attorney just didn't bring this up. So it was really his word against hers, the mother, Marcella. And it's clear to me that she was lying. She lied about events, and the jury obviously believed her and not Kris. And that's why I was convicted. But then subsequently, medical experts all agree that this stomach contents indicate that he did die much earlier. And it's not even really disputed, but what happened is that when it reached federal appeal, the federal courts all agreed that he was innocent, but then the state appealed, and the reason the appeal was dismissed was simply that it had been filed too late. It had been filed after the 1 year time limit. There's a time limit. The federal appeal has to be filed within 1 year of some date, and that is the sole reason why he is still in prison. And that
look,
to any sensible person will seem ridiculous, won't it?
Absolutely, but I just want there's a burning question which I don't know if it's not as obvious to everybody else as it is to me, or whether I'm just in cloud cuckoo land. A while ago, you said that he'd had a meal about between 6 and 7. The contents of his stomach had not yet been digested, which suggests that he would have died within a couple of hours of that meal.
Within minutes, we were told.
Within hours. So even if it was within hours, you give it about 9 o'clock-ish at the very latest. He didn't come home until about 9:30. And then we're saying that the body was found about 12 o'clock midnight. But has anybody asked the question, has anybody answered the question, where was the child between 9:30 and midnight?
Mm-hmm. No, nobody's been asking that question.
What's the scenario?
Well, according to the mother, he was, in that she's saying she put him to bed, etc.
Okay, you put a child to bed. The child is 22 months old. How does a 22-month-old child get out of bed and out on the lawn?
Well,
come out of its bedroom. Was it upstairs, downstairs?
It doesn't really
I don't know.
add up. I mean, the prosecution case is that for some reason Kris went off to his bedroom, got the child out of his bed for some strange reason, murdered him for a totally unknown reason, and then took the body outside the house, at the front of the house. It really doesn't even make sense, because why? I mean,
Did they have any forensic evidence whatsoever to corroborate their theory?
No.
I don't think so, no.
Not one thing.
It was solely the story that Marcella told.
Yes.
She was just lying. I think the reason she was lying is because there was some kind of neglect involved in the death. I doubt she actually deliberately killed her own child. That's unlikely. I suspect he either fell. There was apparently another child a couple of weeks earlier. A child of hers had actually fallen from a roof. Because he wasn't being looked after properly. I don't think that's probably what happened in this case, but we can't say what happened because we don't know. But I would strongly suspect some kind of accidental death. Maybe fell from a chair. That's a very, very common thing that happens. Toddlers fall from high chairs, land on their heads. It can often be fatal, or some other kind of accident. Is what I would say happened.
Okay, so then let's go to the most important question of all, in my opinion, is what was the actual cause of death? What was the recorded actual cause of death?
Well, it was this single head wound. It was
Yes.
a fractured skull, quite a severely fractured skull, I believe.
Which would have been consistent with a fall or a bang.
Yes.
So so here you have this man who's living with this woman who's got 3 children. You've mentioned. I take it he wasn't the father of any of those children.
No.
Okay. Had there been any reports or concerns of him disciplining or having a fallout with or mistreating or...
No. Matter of fact, I would like to mention one thing. He actually did not want to stay with her, and the ironic thing is, because of how she was with the children, he was staying because of the children. So it's kind of ironic that he stayed there to protect them, and then this happens, and he's the one locked up.
We've just last week we did the story of the Samaj Crosby child. I don't know if any of you know of this case. Samaj Crosby is a 17-month-old child, and basically and it's a very sad story indeed. It's all about neglect of the family, dereliction of duty from child welfare and social services, and bad policing all around. The whole issue was terrible. But let me just give you in a ballpark figure of speech just the circumstances surrounding that. You have the parents, the mother who contacts the police and tells them that the child is missing. She phones the police and she makes the phone call. The 17-month-old child is missing. So the police arrive to the house, and she refuses the police entry into the house. They're not allowed. She doesn't allow them to come into the house for them to be able to either conduct a search or to ask any questions or follow up on anything. She point blank refuses to let them into the house. And there's 3 adults in the house: the mother, the grandmother, and an auntie. And so the police go out and they start all of this search out in the community. They've got, there were hundreds of officers and other service people and people in the community all got involved in searching for this 17-month-old child. Sometime after, the mother leaves the house and comes back with a lawyer. And within minutes, all 3 adults in the house are lawyered up. At that point, the lawyer then allows the police permission and access into the house. This is 5 hours later. Bear with me. I'm going to get there. 5 hours later, having had this child missing, having had all the forces out looking for him, the child is found dead under the settee that they were sitting on. But unfortunately, I think within hours or a day or so, the house was burnt down, and any form of evidence or forensic evidence that could incriminate them has also gone. And up to this point, there are still no charges. And I can't help but believe that the reason why there are no charges is because the amount of charges that would then be levied onto the social services and the police who would have had the authority to force access into that property based on the fact that there was a minor missing, and a suspicious behaviour of the family that wouldn't give them access to the house. But again, children are failed, and all the time, and here you have a 22-month-old child, and it seems to me that no one has actually looked at the root cause of how this child might have died, and they've just cottoned on, and they've just allowed the mother to use Kris as a scapegoat without any proper investigation. Because if you've got no forensics, if the timeline doesn't even match, for the life of me, I still can't work out why there hasn't been an additional investigation.
Well, there is one thing I should mention. Dr. Wright, who is a forensic specialist, he did get involved a couple of years ago, and he did what he could do with looking over the case and going through everything. And he said his best guess of what had happened is that she most likely swung the child by his arm and his head hit the kitchen table, but that also that because he had eaten some pink yogurt, strawberry yogurt, and the yogurt was still pink and slimy in his stomach, which meant that he would have died within minutes and not even hours. So Dr. Wright did look over this, and that information is also on the freekrishelton.org site from Dr. Wright.
Shannon, can you just say something, because I think there is some information that this mother, we heard about the child that 2 weeks earlier had fallen from a roof. Was she using drugs? Was there some other was there some reason why she wasn't a very good mother?
Well, I could only guess. There must have been some mental instability is all I'm guessing. She had a history of some child abuse. But one thing that Dr. Wright mentioned also in his report is that she was drugging the children with over-the-counter medications to make them sleep. And they found that in the child's system as well.
Okay. And obviously, yeah. So I suppose she's got these 3 young children. Maybe she's finding it hard to cope with them. Maybe she's,
We're fully aware that there are people with mental health issues that need help and support. And we're fully aware that there are people like that who have children, unfortunately, and struggle to keep them and bring them up and look after them okay. And we're also quite familiar with the fact that spouses or relationships that are formed from that, the people that come into their lives almost feel obliged to stick around for the sake of those children once they've actually formed a bond and a relationship with them. But what we can't get our head around is a full and thorough investigation with the knowledge of that at hand in order to get to the bottom of the truth. Because it seems like I could. Here's the thing: if she was a sheriff's daughter, the mayor's niece, or something else like that, you could understand why somebody would be trying to cover this up. But just as in the Samaj Crosby case, but there's no connection to the authorities.
Actually, I did find out that she does have connection. I don't remember exactly who and what, but there was some connection. I don't want to misrepresent who it was or what. I can't remember the details, but she was connected, and her family was also friends with most of the law enforcement down there.
Yeah, that's again. There is a.
That wouldn't be surprising. There must be some reason. There might be some underlying reason why this went the way it did.
Because common sense would say that you would investigate down that line, even if they had arrested Kris, even if she had put Kris in the frame, the information that was available to them, that they would have pursued at the very least, corroborated in some way or another, even if it was only to dismiss that information as relevant. But I can't see why that hasn't been looked at as deeply as it should have been, and why that hasn't been used in Kris's defense. Now let's talk about Kris's defense, shall we? Because for me, if he has gone to prison, then based on all what we can see already and what we've heard so far, then he couldn't have had that good of a defense.
No, he didn't. He had a one of those free lawyers that didn't know what he was doing.
A free lawyer that didn't know what he was doing.
He didn't. I don't know all the details. I'm really bad at repeating the details. This is also on the .org site about that. I can't think of what you call those free lawyers at the moment, but he didn't do his job. He didn't even show one bit of evidence.
Yeah.
He didn't show one bit of evidence of his innocence or anything.
George,
I can read something here. In fact, Hooper was so inexperienced that even following his relocation to Tampa, Florida, he continued to overlook significance of an alleged offence having committed so far outside the time frame original by the prosecution, resulting in another hapless client, George A. Burgos, being wrongly convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment from a capital offence. So I haven't checked out that case, but I think you'll find that that's another wrongful conviction.
Wow.
So
George, talk us through some of these, how somebody who is facing such a serious offence such as Kris could end up with such a hapless lawyer, and how that's allowed to proceed. In your experience and your knowledge, as best as you can, how does somebody end up with like this?
Well, part of the trouble is that defence lawyers are not well paid, and part of the trouble is that they're overworked. They've got too many cases to handle at one time. And part of the trouble is just that they're not always very competent. They may be inexperienced. They may not really they may be freshly qualified. They may just not really know enough. They might be just about qualified in law. And often they come onto the case just before trial, and they'll spend a few hours on it, and they won't really investigate, because in this case clearly what was needed is an investigation of the medical evidence.
So in layman's terms,
and then it sort of got. I mean, the extraordinary thing is this case was overturned. In fact, it was actually overturned in the state appeals as well. But somehow or other that got reinstated.
Let's go back. Let's rewind. Okay, let's go back to the trial, because I want to hold you on the overturning on the appeal, right? I just want to focus just on the trial at the minute. So towards at the end of the trial, what was everybody's? I mean, you wouldn't have been there, George, but and neither were you, Shannon. But what was everybody gauging then? Was everybody thinking, well, this is just going to, he's going to be acquitted and he'll be allowed to go? Was that the general consensus, do you think, at the time?
I can't comment on that, Kervin. Yes, I don't know an awful lot about the details about the trial and what the feeling was at the time of the trial.
So Shannon, when you in speaking with Kris, was he of the belief that he would be exonerated, he'd be found not guilty, and he was just going to be acquitted and dismissed at trial?
He didn't think at all. Yes, he didn't think he would be convicted at all, but it didn't make any sense because he didn't do anything. And then part of the trial, one thing that I thought was interesting that I did learn about is that they let Marcella mess with evidence, and when the crib needed to be constructed the way it was in the house, they had her put it together for them. I mean, things that you're not supposed to do, she was doing with the evidence.
Wow. How would they, in a court of law, how would that be permitted, George?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, Kervin.
No, I know. But in our knowledge and experience,
what I will say is that I think in Florida you see some of this unfiles, and moreover, their appeal system seems to be one of the worst. It seems to be one of the hardest states to get wrongful convictions overturned. I've seen, numerous cases where they stonewall. They just don't give people a fair chance at all. I don't know exactly the reason for it, but it seems like they view the function of the appeal courts as solely to deny the appeals. They don't seem to see it as seeking justice at all. That's my view of it.
One thing I thought was interesting. I'm sorry. One thing I thought was interesting is that when Kris first got sentenced, Marcella wrote in a letter saying he's a really good guy. I hope he gets off on good behavior. What mother would do that if someone just killed her child?
Absolutely not. It doesn't. You'd have the voodoo doll with pins going through them, wouldn't you?
Right.
Look, I'm just having a look at this Free Kris Helton site, and something else stands up for me. I'm just going to read it as it is because it's not my information, it's what's on the site. It says here that Kris sought post-conviction DNA testing on 1A, the physical evidence found on the victim's body, including an unidentified hair, 2, the physical evidence seized from inside the home which he shared with Gunderson on Little Torch Key, including the clothing and shoes that he allegedly wore while murdering the victim, and 3, the physical evidence collected from outside their Little Torch Key home, including a blood-stained rock wrapped up in a white paper towel recovered from the very spot where the victim was fortuitously discovered by Gunderson, because a careful examination revealed that neither he nor the victim had any cuts, scratches, or abrasions. And even so, the state post-conviction and appellate courts refused to even consider whether just one exculpatory DNA test excluding Kris and or positively identifying someone else, especially Goodison, perhaps confirming that her blood is on the rock recovered from the spot where she fortuitously discovered the victim, can be coupled with what the federal courts have repeatedly found to be the other inviolable and persuasive proof of his innocence to further exonerate him of the victim's murder. Now, in trying to understand that, right, in layman's terms, so they found this rock outside the house that's got the blood stains on it, and it's possible that the blood on that stone could be from the mother as well as the child, or just the child.
Just the child, I think,
and that would then prove that that's where the child died, outside, not inside. And the hair that was found. So why was there no DNA and forensic testing done when they actually had, forensic evidence that could have been used to either prove guilt or find innocent?
Good question.
George, do we have any idea why that wasn't presented?
Well, I think the answer is that, in fact, DNA testing is not routinely conducted. It is in certain situations, in certain cases, but DNA tests are very expensive, and generally they don't get done on, sort of kind of, I wouldn't say like random bits of evidence, but all sorts of bits of evidence to try and find the truth. That doesn't normally happen.
But here's the thing. Sorry a minute, George. You've got a guy who's fighting.
Do you remember in that the trial we discussed in February? There were all sorts of DNA tests that could have been done to establish the truth.
Absolutely.
There.
Yeah, absolutely.
All those requests by the defence for DNA testing were denied. Yeah. All of them.
But here's the thing.
Even though a man's life is at stake,
But the defence did ask for the DNA test to be done, right? In that case.
They did, yes,
right.
But nothing. That was all denied.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm trying to say here is, there doesn't seem to be any apparent evidence that Kris's defence lawyer requested any DNA sampling to be done on his behalf, bearing in mind that he was fighting for his life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, these lawyers, they typically don't do anything. A public defender, I mean, they will turn up at court, they will stand there, they will do a sort of rudimentary cross-examination of the witness, but they won't do any investigation typically.
I'm hearing that, but how does that instill any confidence in a community or a public? Or even family members who are looking for justice for the loss of their loved ones? How does that fill them with any confidence that justice will prevail?
It probably comes down mostly to money, to be honest. It's
irrespective of the money. If I don't want to be hating the wrong person for the death of my loved one. I want them to get it right. So for me,
the other aspect is that it's often the person who gets their story in first, which in this case would be the mother, Marcella. And once, somebody started to believe that story and there's an arrest being made, then the prosecutors will do absolutely everything to avoid admitting they've made some kind of mistake. But
looking at what we've got, the prosecution actually haven't provided anything that proves that he's guilty.
Well, other than what Marcella said.
But a decent defence lawyer would have called that hearsay.
You've got two people who could have been responsible for the death, essentially, and it's the one against the other. Who do you believe? And there should be corroborating evidence because clearly she had an incentive to lie.
So let's just look at her for a minute. So Shannon. Based on the conversations that you've had with Kris, and I'm fully understanding that's still hearsay or third-party relation. What did Kris tell you? What has Kris told you about Marcella that portrays her or reveals her nature, her character, her behaviour patterns, and why she would be capable of committing the crime?
Well, I have asked him what she was like and what the relationship was like out of curiosity, and he said that she had quite the temper, and she would just take her purse and start swinging it and hitting him, and she would threaten all of them with the frying pan, and I mean, she would just have moments where she would go off, but then when she wasn't like that, she was really kind and easy to get along with. She just had these moments where I don't know if I should say she snapped, but she just wasn't in her normal character. And but his heart was
I
for
suppose
these
it'd be fair to
children.
say that she wasn't in control.
Right, she would lose control. Yes.
Okay.
And one thing, oh, I forgot what I was going to tell you. There was something
That's
that
fine. Okay, I'm going to jump straight in here while you think. So here we have evidence of a woman who's known to have behavioural and a temporal issue that leans towards her losing control at times. Has Kris ever had that report levied at him?
Yes. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. The night that the child died, and Kris said he does believe it was an accident. He doesn't think that she looked to murder him. That he believes it was an accident, and she was scared. And that before, when the ambulance was on the way to get the child, that she asked him to please not point. She was pleading with him, don't point fingers at me, and I won't point fingers at you. And he agreed to that. Well, he kept to his bargain, but she obviously didn't keep to her end of it.
And the unfortunate thing is, without trying to paint any bad picture on Kris, that's where he becomes complicit, because I could understand why she would say that, but she's banking on Chris's character and possible feelings for her to protect her and the family.
Yes.
While in her heart, she's already got an agenda to point the finger firmly at him.
And she knows, because of his character, that's what he'll do. He will take care of them and make sure they're safe. That's what he does.
Do you know at what point did Kris realize that this wasn't going to go his way? Was it just right at the final end when they found him guilty, or was there a time during the trial when he thought, well, this ain't going my way?
I think when they allowed her to start putting the crib together and messing with evidence is when he started thinking, what the heck is going on here?
And wouldn't any defense lawyer, barrister, solicitor, whatever, in his right mind, thrown up an objection at this point, asking whether that was right?
They should.
George, don't you think that even because you wanted to come in there, George?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there at the trial, so I don't know exactly what went on. I don't quite know why the crib was important, to be honest. Obviously, my view is dominated by this evidence that the child died way before Kris even got home. So I don't know exactly.
Here's the biggest question.
Exactly
here's the biggest
the
question.
jury.
I can't see I can't see what the crib has to do with it when they found a rock outside that's got blood on it that they've refused to sample.
Right. They said something about the side of the crib wouldn't stay up by itself, but when she reconstructed it, it did. So the child couldn't have snuck out of his crib. They were just speculating on some crib stuff. Really had nothing to do with anything, I don't think.
So I suppose.
I think
Go on,
it may have had to do with the defence. The defence actually advanced a number of different theories, some of which probably weren't actually possible. So maybe the defence was saying, "Oh, somehow or other, the child sort of got out of its crib, fell." But that really wouldn't explain, as far as I can see, how the child was found outside the house. I think in the front of the house. So that really just, trying to advance a defence theory that doesn't add up wasn't a very good idea. I mean, I think it's absolutely clear that, either Marcella was lying or he was guilty. So they had to impeach what she was saying and just make it make it like the prosecution case didn't make any sense. And of course, the medical evidence would have been incredibly important, because if you've got a situation where it's one person's word against another, then that medical evidence is going to decide the issue, and they just failed to do that at the trial. The stomach content evidence is very well known for us, as a means of establishing death, the time of death. And so many cases do come down to it. I mean, I'm following another case where the Innocence Project attorneys, no less, are representing Kirsten Lobata. There was an evidentiary hearing last week. And it all revolves around medical evidence which would establish the time of death. In that case, they're looking at the fact that the blowflies didn't lay any eggs on the body, so you can tell that it couldn't have been earlier in the day. So often this medical evidence is very important, and it needs to be investigated before the trial to make sure that you have a fair trial and justice is done. And it just didn't happen in this case.
You just reminded me of something else. They said, the forensics, Dr. Wright, he said that the child, from what he can gather, from what his investigation is, that when the child died in the home and then he was tossed outside into the gravel, and because of the mosquito bites there was like 70 mosquito bites that are post-mortem, I believe is the word, after he was dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's more evidence of what actually happened.
Yeah.
And that this evidence often is quite crucial to try and figure out who's telling the truth. Doctors have a very important role, but I mean, in fact, the evidence was there quite early on, because when the child was taken to hospital, they were saying this child's cold to touch. He must have been dead for many hours.
Yeah.
Is my understanding. You can actually, but what's so extraordinary about this case is that there was a federal hearing after the trial. There was, medical experts testified for 3 days, I believe. It was all quite clear that on the evidence, there's really no dispute about that. And then it was reversed, and then it went up to the next appeal court level, and it was upheld. And only when they asked for an en-banc rehearing on this totally technical issue, that the appeal was filed more than a year after it should have been. So the appeal was filed after it should have been, which would be a 1-year time limit. And that there's this 1-year time limit for federal habeas appeals. And there's just no justice in that idea. Why should somebody have to remain in prison because their lawyer filed the appeal a bit late? Apparently, the reason the appeal was filed late is that the lawyer had some major issues going on in life. Can you say what that was, Shannon?
Yes, the lawyer, I don't remember which parent it was first, but one of his parents died, and then shortly after the other one died, and neither one of them was expected to die. It was unexpected. And so the lawyer's world his name is Mel Black, his life got turned upside down, and that's why it didn't get filed on time, as he was dealing with the death of his parents that were unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know how. Do you know how late the appeal was filed? I don't actually know that. Was it a matter of weeks or months or what?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know exactly how late it was, but there's this very strict time limit, and I just don't think it's just totally unreasonable to have all these hearings, to have all the federal appeal courts declare that he's actually innocent, and then suddenly say, oh look, there's this technicality, the appeal was filed a week too late, we can't overturn this conviction. That just goes against every sense of justice that anyone could ever have. Even
morals. Everything. It just goes against everything that's right. Doesn't make any sense. And we've also filed clemency with the governor, Rick Scott, and he's had his clemency papers for 6 years. All he has to do is sign it. I mean, 6 years, he's done nothing. Everywhere we turn, it's like nothing's happening.
Yeah, it seems like it's just nobody wants to do anything. The people who've got authority to actually do something about this and put it right are not doing what they should be doing.
Right.
And I think there's a feeling that, if people are listening to this, they should be writing to the district attorney or to Governor Rick Scott and putting public pressure on these people to do the right thing.
You reminded me, Mark Wilson, the assistant attorney down in the Florida Keys, he is the one who people need to be writing to, or Rick Scott, one or the other. But Dennis, who is the state attorney down there, he has assigned Mark Wilson to the case, but he at this time isn't really doing anything. We need support.
Right, so let's rewind a bit.
Okay.
Let's rewind a bit. Kris's sentence, and what was the official sentence? What was he actually sentenced to?
Life in prison.
Life without parole, or what?
With parole, and we went to parole last year, and they pretty much said they're not going to do anything because they don't know what to do with him, I guess. And we appealed it, and they sent us home again. And I had the lawyer with me explaining to them that it's a procedural technicality. I had Dr. Wright, the forensic specialist, with me explaining everything, and they did nothing.
So he was sentenced to life imprisonment with parole. So off he tots to jail.
As a matter of fact, the parole board said, we're going to add 30 years onto this for the mitigating circumstances of 70 mosquito bites, if that makes any sense.
70 mosquito bites.
That's
because that throws the timeline back into that he could have been there.
And then we found out they are making millions of dollars off of all these inmates they are holding on to that are wrongly convicted or innocent or parole eligible, and they're not letting out on parole. They're making millions.
So he goes to jail for life for a crime that obviously, even based on what the trial judges could see.
Yes, and 4 of those judges were federal judges who said he needs to be discharged.
There's any number of judges. There's any number of federal judges and appeal judges who've said he's innocent.
Yeah.
Not even that he needs a retrial, but they said this case should be dismissed because.
So then he goes. Then he goes for appeal. Tell us about that appeal process as best you can, Shannon. So, how long after he was sentenced did he first file for appeal?
I think George would be better at answering the technical questions. I get dates and everything mixed up.
Yeah, I mean the appeal proceedings have been very complicated. He originally appealed at the state level. Just to understand how appeals work in the United States, mostly your best chance of winning an appeal is generally within the state you're in, not with federal appeals. And he did appeal, and he was successful. The case was overturned, but then the state appealed to the next level up, and it was reinstated. So that was one.
So layman's terms, he was granted an appeal, and then it was quickly overturned again.
Yes, that's right. So I'm just scrolling through it. Yeah, they unanimously, the Third District of Appeal in Miami, Florida, unanimously reversed Kris's wrongful conviction, with directions to discharge him outright, because the purely circumstantial evidence adduced at the trial didn't preclude the reasonable possibility that Gunderson committed the crime hours earlier than alleged by the prosecution. So that was what happened in 1993, quite soon after the trial. But then somehow or other, there was a rehearing. Somehow or other, a couple of judges granted a motion for a rehearing filed by the state of Florida. The three-judge panel, so that was three judges who originally unanimously found that it should be dismissed and he should be discharged, and they issued a split opinion affirming the conviction based on a new analysis of the circumstantial evidence. I don't know what that's a gap in my knowledge. I don't know what that new analysis was. So I think they sort of came up with their own theory to somehow make him guilty. I have no idea what that was. I really, I suppose I should go and have a look at those legal filings. And yeah, one of the judges dissented, saying that he was at least entitled to a new trial because of the failure to use the gastric contents evidence, because he had this light dinner of chicken rice and strawberry yogurt, which was undigested, at 6:30 p.m. Just checked the times, well before Kris arrived home at 9:30 p.m. So that was 3 hours after the light meal. So what's so extraordinary is that the evidence in this case is so clear, but somehow or other the legal authorities in Florida, or in conjunction with this appeal being filed late, have managed to somehow sustain this conviction, which is just ridiculous. You know, there's no rational reason for it to be here. It's just purely unjust, and nobody involved with the case could have any idea, could reasonably think it wasn't unjust. If it's to do with anything, it's just about maintaining prosecutorial careers or something, for the truth not to come out. It's just got buried. Yeah. And it's just...
From what I'm seeing, from what I'm hearing, and from what I'm reading, there is no legal representative that actually believes that this man is guilty of the crime that he was accused and sentenced of committing. And for all intents and purposes, because a defense lawyer who was in a hapless position himself at the time, his world was turned upside down with the loss of his parents and whatever, and his head wasn't in the right space. So he didn't do what he was supposed to have done. A man who's sitting down in prison, having been convicted of a crime that he didn't commit, now has to serve out more time because the paperwork that should have set him free wasn't put in time, even though the judges themselves have already said, let the man go home.
Yes, multiple judges at every kind of level, state judges, federal judges, said this.
How does that work, George? How does that work? How does it, when all, where I come from, and I'm sure that our audience are going to be absolutely baffled by this, because I am. The judges have said free him. They've said let him go. They've said this evidence against him doesn't fit, right? This man couldn't have committed a crime. The evidence actually shows that he couldn't have committed a crime. So let's exonerate him. Let's release him without further ado. And then somebody turns around and says, you didn't actually put the paperwork in time, so I can't.
That's exactly correct. And there's a political failure here that sort of decision could be allowed to stand. I mean, this should be...
And that's the biggest travesty of it all. What a poor excuse for the waste of a man's life in jail.
Yeah. I'm not absolutely sure about the reason for this, but I think it's all related. I suspect it's all related to something called the AEDPA. This was a bill called, which stands for something like hold on, let me find out what it does stand for. It was brought in by Jimmy Carter. And it's something like it's meant to be. It stands for the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, and it was brought in 1996, and it introduced these extremely strict time limits. And what it is in America is that these, these totally unreasonable time limits that should be able to be overridden if justice dictates. It's just too rigid a system. It's just not a reasonable system. That's your own lawyer filing something slightly late should mean that you can't go free. And this Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act absolutely needs to be reformed. And just as a political failure to expose the problems it's caused. And the federal judges
but here's the thing.
Say themselves, we can see that people are unjustly convicted. We know they're innocent. But this act, the AEDPA, prevents us acting because our hands are tied, but because of what this law says.
The only person who made a mistake in any of this was a defense lawyer. And yet the only person who's suffering because of it is Kris Helton.
Kris and our whole family.
I don't get that, because if the defense lawyer has made a mistake, then he needs to be penalised. Whether they fine him, they reprimand him, they suspend him, or they do something with him for him failing to act accordingly in his duty, but for the innocent to carry on being subjected to this torture, and his family being made to continue to live through it because this defense. It's like me going out to rob a bank and you're all the way where you are, George, and they say, well, listen, we can't get to him, so we're just going to send you to jail instead. It's as ludicrous as that.
Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a quote for you, Kervin.
Go ahead.
Which what a federal judge has said. Just take me a second to get it up. It's what an actual federal judge called Alex Kozinski, who's a federal judge, a very senior judge, has said about this act, the ADPA. Okay, I'm going to read you out the quote directly. He says, federal judges have been pretty much shut out from granting habeas relief, which means, letting people off, in most cases, even when they believe an egregious miscarriage of justice has occurred. We now regularly have to stand by in impotent silence, even though it may appear to us that an innocent person's been convicted. So this was the consequence of this act by Bill Clinton. And I think the reason he brought it in was just, because he was a bit politically unpopular at the time. And I don't think, the Congress ever really probably intended it for it to have this effect. I think I don't know what the effect was intended to be, possibly to allow people to be executed more quickly or something. But it's just resulted in these egregious miscarriages of justice not being able to be corrected, even though everyone knows that this, a person might be innocent. And it affects death penalty cases as well. You could have an appeal filed late in a death penalty case, and for that reason, the appeal will never be heard, and the person could be executed. And this is just not right. This act needs to be reformed seriously, but there's just doesn't seem to be any political will in the United States to get this done. And you wonder what the congressmen should be doing to correct the situation. It's just not right. It's the consequence is that lots of people are not able to get the justice they deserve, even when it's when it's so clear, as in a case like this. So this really, the blame for this partly goes to Bill Clinton. And much as Donald Trump may not be your favourite person, Kervin, I was just always wondering, well, maybe Donald would like to put something right that Bill Clinton got wrong. Yes, so we could get something positive out of this presidency.
Well, yeah, we might just be able to get something decent out of him, but here's the thing. What else? Have we got any other cases that we can think of that bears any resemblance to this farce that we're witnessing with Kris Helton's conviction and appeal and then non-appeal? Is there anything?
It's very common. it's very common for there to be procedural bars put forward to stop appeals, to stop very valid appeals going forward. For instance, they will argue that, you know, evidence was available at the time, so, you know, unless it's new evidence that couldn't have been discovered at the time of the trial, they'll say, well, that's not new evidence, you can't use that. They'll say it was a strategic decision by the trial attorney or something. The grounds on which they deny appeals is absolutely extraordinary. You know, it's not just, it's not justice. You know, appeal judges are not making just decisions. I mean, there's what's needed is a public campaign to put some of this stuff right. To, you know, for people to stand up and say, you know, this is not in our name. This shouldn't be going on. You know, you shouldn't be able to deny people justice because something was filed late or because the lawyer didn't do his job. You know, those shouldn't be grounds for denying a person justice. It should just be on the evidence. They should be looking at the evidence, deciding should this person still be in jail on the basis of the evidence.
And that's the thing, though, isn't it, George? That's what everybody else believes a court of law to represent. You are charged with innocent until proven guilty, but you are charged with an offence. You go to court, the evidence is presented, and based on the evidence, and now we've known people to get off with technicalities, but the technicalities has always been because the technicalities rule out the evidence, right?
I think that's largely a myth that people get off because of technicalities. It's very, very rare that I've seen that happen.
Absolutely, I agree with you totally. But where it's been made perfectly clear by even those who stand in authority that this person should not be in jail, I've never heard in the life of me that the technicality keeps him in prison.
I mean, I have seen similar situations. I mean, there's a case called Rodney Lincoln where all of the evidence has been either recanted or proven to be false, but they still now say he has to stay in prison because it's not a death penalty case.
But so where does that leave you in the midst of all of this, Shannon?
Brokenhearted and hopeful. It's hard to everyone who has a loved one in prison. My heart goes out to them, whether they're guilty or innocent. It's so hard on the family as well. I mean, the cost of keeping Kris eating food that's halfway decent instead of food that tastes like throw up. I mean, just that alone, I have to send him $400 a month so he can just have normal type food. And I mean, there's no heating and air where he is, so I worry about that. And I'm the single mom here with my children trying to survive. And when I go to see him, like tonight, I'll leave around midnight. I'll sleep in my car at the prison in Avon Park. And then I get to see him tomorrow for a few hours before I come home, work all week, and do it again. I mean, it's hard. All these families who have inmates, my heart goes out to them. It's hard on our end, too. But I just can't imagine Kris sitting there for 26 plus years, innocent, waiting for help. I mean, this is just, it doesn't make any sense. His whole youth is gone. He's 48 years old now. And all we want is him to be home and be together. There has to be something to help us.
You know, your children they've never met Kris yet, I take it.
Oh yes, they have. They go and go and see him as well because they love him. Okay.
No, yeah. I wanted to go there. So obviously the wrong question, but I thought they hadn't met him because he was.
Yes.
So tell us, you've come from. Let's just lay it right. You've just come from one mad relationship that you've run away from because your ex-husband was losing the plot, and obviously you had to pick up and run with your children, and now you're going into what some other people might assume that is another helter-skelter relationship because the guy's serving life for murder. So what was your
Right.
children's response to you?
Well, I've always been open. I understand. I've always been open and honest with them about my life and everything, and they've already heard about Kris and knew about him, that he was my high school love and da-da-da. So when I found him again, and I said, guys, you're not going to believe this, I found Kris. And they were excited for me, but then when I told them the situation, they were in shock as well. And so they kind of jumped on the crusade to free Kris, and as much as they can as children. Well, my oldest, she's 30. My youngest is 9, and there's 5 of them. So I have a lot of children. But they adore Kris, and they support me. They support him. I've never forced them to go see him because I didn't know what I thought about taking children to a prison. I just, that was not something I really wanted them to see, but they wanted to meet him. So, and then when we got married, well, my 2 youngest ones were visiting their father at the time, but when we got married, my daughter and her daughter came, and they were there with us, and they've been very supportive.
And so your children have met him.
Right.
Sorry, go on, George.
How old are your children now?
The oldest is 30, and the youngest is 9, and there's 5 of them.
Right, that's a good. That's a good fact.
Well, funny you should say that, Shannon. But my oldest is 30, and my youngest is 9.
Oh, funny.
and I have 6.
Oh, funny. I actually had 6, but my 3rd pregnancy was twins, and one of them didn't survive. Okay. So now there's 5. But
so
funny.
The children have a good relationship with Kris as well.
They do.
And they believe him to be innocent.
Yes, they do.
And so how are they taking, because they obviously must be aware of the technicality that we've been discussing that holds this innocent man in jail. What is their thoughts on this procedure or this procedural imperfection? And that's the polite version.
Yes, they're all pretty outraged about it. They don't understand it. They're like, how can a man-made paper, hold somebody in prison and keep them from their family? They don't understand it. They call him Poppy. That's their, to show their affection towards him, they call him Poppy. My youngest one, the 9-year-old, his birthday is 2 days before Kris's, so he thinks that's pretty cool. And when he goes to see Kris, he gives him piggyback rides and stuff. We actually get physical contact, not much. We're allowed one quick hug and one quick kiss when we get there, but then we're allowed to hold hands while we're sitting at the table. He was able to give Moses some piggyback rides, and he enjoyed that. But so it's not like we're behind glass. So it's kind of a more relaxed visitation than some places I've seen.
I have a question for you, Shannon. Have you written to people like Dr. Phil or Oprah Winfrey or people like that? Because what I think's needed in a case in cases like this is it has to be put out to a big audience to create the sort of political pressure to put this situation right. Because what we have here is actually a political failure. It is a political failure. It's a failure to correct the law and to make it just. I don't think anyone would any reasonable person at all could support the current state of affairs, where somebody could be kept in prison for decades just because of some technicality that the appeal was filed a little bit late. Nobody could possibly defend that situation, and so what I think is needed is publicity.
Well, I have
for people
out.
To understand what's actually going on here.
I have reached out several times to several ones, but I haven't heard anything back. And then I got excited when a couple of celebrities started following on the Twitter account, but then nothing came of it, except Sean Connery. He did share a couple of our posts, which was exciting, but we don't really have anyone active.
I mean, what's happened on another case, Kervin, I should say, something very exciting has happened recently. It's a very infamous case, and I might not even mention the name, but a filmmaker has a big film, a 6-part film, was made about this particular murder case in California. It's a death penalty case, and it's produced the most extraordinary change. Everyone who's saying this person was guilty has now switched around and saying no, he's innocent. And there's a couple of cases like that one which has been on Dr. Phil, which is Richard Glossop. As we've got 10,000 people who've liked his Facebook page. So I think social media and working with the people who have a real voice, like Oprah Winfrey or Dr. Phil, or these people who do have a big following, and we need to somehow apply pressure politically to senators, to people in Congress, to get this sorted out. What are they doing in Congress? If they're not there to make unjust laws better, to correct problems in the law.
I know. I feel like I'm just one little ant, though, that everybody's stepping on, and nobody's listening to me. I don't really have the help. We have over 100,000 followers on Twitter, but nobody's doing anything. It's just me.
Here's the thing. George hits on a very good note there, and you may just want to take heed, Shannon. Yes, you mentioned that you had Sean Connery posting stuff, etc. Ask the question. If he's there, send a direct message. Would you send a letter? Ask him if you are in agreement that this is wrong. Would you send a letter to the district or whoever it needs to go to, in order that they open this up or they look at this again? Look at these celebrities that are liking and are reposting, and send them a private message asking them to just pen a letter. I mean, most of them don't even do it themselves. They get their PAs and their secretaries to do it, but it's in their name and they sign it. But if they believe that he's innocent, then are they prepared to put pen to paper and support that? Because it's pointless just retweeting just for the sake of retweeting to look good. You need Kris out of jail. And
right, all the ones that I have written, I have not heard anything back, or
then write again.
Tag them, and I don't.
You've got Shannon. You've got nothing to lose. You've got absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain. He shouldn't be in jail, and something's got to move. Something's got to give some time. You could either sit here waiting for no one to move, or you can keep on pushing and trying to force someone to move.
Yeah, I'm pushing.
I also wonder, Shannon, whether you could approach people in Florida. I don't know if you have senators, people in the House, Senate, or Florida politicians who could take this up. Because I mean, there seems to be a problem of politicians just not listening to what the people are saying here.
They don't. I sat and emailed each and every one of them in the legislature as well, and I heard nothing back.
Yeah, I mean, it's there seems to be a real democratic failure. There's that the politicians are not listening to what people are saying. And I don't know why that is, but it's an extraordinary situation.
And I've written Rick Scott more times than I can even remember, because he's had his clemency papers for 6 years. All he has to do is sign it, and he still just does nothing.
Yeah. I mean, there have been some good developments. I mean, some very dodgy people have been started to be voted out of power. District attorneys, more justice-oriented district attorneys have been elected who are starting to sort things out. Notably in Texas and in Florida as well. So I think there is a political mood to try and improve things.
Here's another way forward. There are some high-profile exonerees that are out there, people who have been set free, who are prominent in the media in America right now. And, maybe petitioning them and getting them to endorse what you're trying to do might also add some weight to your claim.
That is a good idea.
Because especially the exonerees, they're high profile at the minute. Everybody's clattering around them for interviews, and and when you've got something that is blatantly, obviously innocent as Kris, that's going to be the one that's going to roll off people's tongue, especially once they see it for what it is. because
Right.
it's not even a case of people having to disprove the evidence or question any evidence. It's already been agreed that, all of that is irrelevant and he should be free. The only
Yes.
thing that's holding him in prison is a procedural misconduct.
Yes. Yes.
And that
Yeah.
for the life of me benefits nobody. Who actually benefits from Kris Helton staying in jail? Who benefits from it? Nobody. There's absolutely no mileage in him spending another minute in jail when all the federal judges have already said this man should be free.
Yeah.
It's absolutely the case, and I mean, it's not. Of course, they didn't say this recently, and it's the federal judges themselves are saying it. The federal judges are saying, this is really frustrating. We can't free people who we believe to be innocent. But despite the federal judges, like Judge Alex Kosinski saying this is a problem, the politicians in Congress haven't taken any notice of this, and I don't understand why. I think it actually needs a presidential candidate to make this an issue. To make this a justice issue, but for some reason they don't seem. As yet they haven't been interested. It needs a new politician to come along and say this needs to be fixed, and there are fixes being done. I mean, all over the country there are gradual improvements being made to the to laws, usually at state level, but for some reason at federal level, not very much ever seems to get done.
Here's the thing: you could understand a procedural error keeping somebody in jail for days or weeks while they iron out the paperwork. But a procedural error keeping somebody in prison for decades, a lifetime.
It's just unacceptable. It should be politically
Absolutely unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. There is absolutely no excuse or explanation for Kris Helton being in prison. None.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could defend it. But
so then we've got an audience who is listening to this show, and many people who are signed up to the Free Kris Helton website and a wrongful convictions group and etc. All of these people are, but we're not seeing anything. We're not seeing anything manifest from it.
Right.
And so what my question is, what are the politicians? You'd think the politicians would be looking for issues to take up, wouldn't you? I mean,
And here's a quick win. Here's a quick fix. Here's one that could put you in the spotlight immediately. Right? It's wrong. It doesn't belong. It should not be in place. Nowhere on this planet can you justify a procedural error keeping somebody in jail when everything else says that they're innocent.
I don't think so. I agree. The trouble is we're just ordinary people who don't have the political power to get something done, and maybe it needs to go up, through the party, the party machines. People like the Democratic National Congress or the Republican National Committee or whatever these political organisations are, to say, this is an issue here. We need some kind of justice reform. They seem to be more concentrating on the issue of very long sentences for non-violent offences, for drug offences, which certainly is a valid issue.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing, Shannon.
Yeah.
You need to be putting this out more. If I was you, I would try and find a news crew that will come and film me while I sleep in my car overnight, waiting to go and visit my innocent husband. Right? If not, I would be filming it myself and posting it out there on social media, and I hope that everybody else starts to, repost it and make it go viral. I mean, you're sleeping in your car overnight, waiting for the chance to go and visit your husband in prison when he should be at home having dinner with you.
Yes.
You need to. I believe, and I say this in love. You need to up the ante. You really need to push your boat out. You need to, take this to another level. I understand that you might. Yeah, go on, George.
See if you get on the evening news at your local, TV station as well, because
Yeah.
I do believe that when there's more publicity, when more people know that the district attorney is not doing his job, is just putting it in his in tray and leaving it there for months, and he's going to be seeking re-election at some point, then going public actually can help. So I would try and
Absolutely.
approach local Florida news services. I've got a story for you. Will you have me on air? And you can ask. They can ask the district attorney for their response, and that might embarrass him sufficiently that you might get something done.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'd also get my children. I would use any means necessary. I'm really sorry about this, Shannon. I've got to say it. I'd use any means necessary. I'd get my children to be talking to them. He's not even their father. They've just come from one madcap relationship, and potentially they could have been heading into another. But they're right behind you. They're right behind him, and they're standing firmly in that. And the story needs to be heard. And I think, just trying to muddle through it on your own is not going to get you the answers or the results that you need. Because at the minute,
you need the mass media. You need your local TV news reporter to be on your side.
Absolutely,
you need to be in that news slot on the news at 6 or 8, and you might, that's the way forward. Because unfortunately, social media is all very well, but it doesn't quite have the clout that the traditional news media has. There's going to be a handful of people listening to us tonight, and I would say you need to use the traditional mass media, TV, newspapers, to get this into the open, so more people know about it. I don't know if it'll work. But I think that's what.
But that's what you've got to be prepared to do.
Because I know what politicians pay attention to is when they're being criticised in public. Then they may respond. Then they may say, "Oh, we've got a situation here. I'm not going to get re-elected if we don't solve the situation. If we don't have a reasonable response to it."
This free Kris Helton has got to gain momentum, and he's got to now step outside of the social media network. It's there, it's prominent, it's successful there. People are responding to it, subscribing to it, and etc. But now it needs to come outside of there and come outside into the real world. It needs to be right in their face. They don't have to go onto the website to see it, but unfortunately when it goes on the TV, they're going to be more concerned with what everybody else is watching, what everybody else is listening to, and how everybody else is viewing that, and they're going to want to respond to that.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, that's some of the best advice we can give you for now. So apart from that, what else have you guys got going on for you in support of your campaign to free Kris?
Me personally, I have flyers that I print out and put around. I was doing postcards, but I kind of ran out of funds to do that because I'm supporting my family plus Kris, and the funds are hard. But there's different things. The social media, I'm constantly on the social media with the Facebook and the Twitter, trying to take care of that. There's also a YouTube channel, which is time consuming to do all that as well. Plus I work 9 hours a day and I have my children, and I'm trying to do the social media thing and the posters but I've written everybody. I'm like exhausted on who to write and what to do.
Write everybody. Get a standard letter ready. I think the way forward has to be TV channels, whether it's a national one like Dr. Phil, or whether it's a local TV station, in the area of your district, of the district attorney concerned, so that you can try and get on their national news or morning breakfast news with a piece that will actually embarrass him. If he's not doing his job, you can say, why has he had this on his desk for 4 years and he hasn't done anything?
or have whatever the time period is, because often you'll find local news stations do have an investigative reporter who wants to have a good story to follow up on.
We've been worried about who to trust, because some people, they just twist things around and make it something it's not.
I think this is a pretty clear case, because you've got all these federal appeal decisions and local state appeal decisions, and the only reason it was denied was because the appeal was filed late. I think that can really it's not a difficult case to convince people he's innocent. That's so that there isn't that problem to it. Obviously it involves the death of a child, which is always a very difficult subject, but I think I think that's got to be the way forward. You've got to try and find a local TV news reporter, or any kind of local news reporter, who would take it up for you, and they're looking for stories, so there's no reason that shouldn't have some possible way forward. And I'll bring my children along to the TV studio, or ones your youngest children. I'm sure they'd love to see you there, and put your case to them to the local people on TV, and then that's what I would try. I'm not saying that's going to do the trick, but I think that's the way forward. I would not spend so much time on trying to write to people, because often that doesn't produce an effect. Take it to the media, and you might just you've got a lovely human story there, and maybe that could succeed.
And that's a fantastic story. And on top of the story is that this whole, because I fell in love with your love story. The fact that you came for that broken relationship, and you sought out for your old love from your old sweetheart, and upon finding him, that's the predicament that you found him in. But because you know him and you know him so well, you are adamant and strong-hearted enough to pick up all that you had and move.
Yes.
What a story! And I'm telling you something, whether you realise it or not, I don't think that there's going to be a decent news featured organisation that ain't going to want to have a piece of that, right? Especially when you add to it all the additional information of the fact that he's innocent and he should be free.
Yes. Thank you.
You've just got to have the confidence to go for it. You've got to believe in your heart that you're going to get the desired result that you want, and you've got to give it everything you've got. Because I'll tell you something, the longer you leave it is the more that you're going to feel like you're punishing yourself, because you're waiting for something that ain't just yet coming. But give it everything that you've got, then at least you know in your heart it's not down to you, and it's not down to him not trying hard enough. You're trying everything you know, and even that what you don't know. Give it everything you've got. I want to leave the last few words to you. How can people help? Where can they go to? What are the links that you want them to so they can find out more information and support? If they're not sure on what to believe, or whether we're just making this up as we're going along, where can they go and find the information that we're talking about that proves his innocence? Here's a few minutes for you to get that all out, Shannon.
Okay, at the freekrishelton.org, and that's Kris with a K, freekrishelton.org. That has most of the information you need. There's a link at the top for the petition. We are on Twitter. We are on Facebook. We need help getting the word out there. Rather, you want to put flyers around. But the biggest thing that I think people could actually do is write to the governor, Rick Scott, who has Kris's clemency papers that need to be signed. Also, the assistant state attorney, Mark Wilson, who lives in the Keys of Florida where this happened. He has been assigned to the case, and he's not doing anything with it, and we need people to support and write into Mark Wilson, the assistant state attorney. So those two people are the main people, is Rick Scott, the governor of Florida, and the assistant state attorney, Mark Wilson. And then also, like I said, the freekrishelton.org has the petition, and it also has more information on there of how people can help.
Okay. Well, listen, Dion, we just want to thank you again for being with us on Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio, and sharing the story of Kris Helton with us, his life and his battle for freedom. And we look
Thank you
forward
both so much.
we look forward to getting an update on when he's released, because he's going to have to get released sooner or later. They can't keep him forever. At some point, they're going to have to open up those gates and let him out. But we just want to thank you for joining us and sharing that story with us. And hopefully we'll catch up again with you soon. George, do you want to anything that you want to add before you leave, sir?
And just to say, Kevin, I've very much enjoyed coming on your show again today, and I've got lots more cases to talk about. It's everything from death penalty cases down to all sorts of other cases of people locked up in prison for crimes they didn't do, and I'm just doing my little bit for it, and I think a lot of other people are as well, but we need some means of getting the politicians to listen who can actually put these things right. This would be my message.
And let's just remember, we have got, there's been over 40 cases that have gone in through the wrongful conviction group that have been turned over with exonerees out there. And obviously, the one that we did on this show this time last year was the Coach Jason, which again, he was released just about a month or so after we did the show, and we're not trying to take credit for that. That wasn't anything to do with us, because that was going back to trial anyway, that was going back to appeal anyway. But we are aware of cases that have gone up and the right result has come out of it.
Yeah, we're following these cases and cheering from the sidelines, but it's a huge battle. Yeah. I mean, there's organisations like the Innocence Project that are absolutely outstanding as well.
They do some absolutely great work. I've done some work with them and had them on the show.
Unfortunately, I have to say, Florida seems to be like a desert almost in terms of exonerations and successful innocent projects.
Yes, we've been writing the
Innocence Project in Florida, so I don't want to.
We've been writing the Innocence Projects for 15 years.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think they're sort of overwhelmed by cases, and they've got more than they can actually take on. But they are all doing for work, but it's not always enough. And
sometimes we don't know why they pick one case over another, and then we look at a case like this and we think that this is one that should just be championed and dealt with because it's a win-win, quick fix scenario, but yet there's something that's just holding this one back for a lifetime. This guy should have been released 24 years ago, if not longer. And every day he spends in prison is a day too long, in my opinion.
Yes.
So, absolutely.
Guys, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Shannon, we wish you all the best. We're here for you. Please don't hesitate to contact us if there's anything more that we can do to support you in any way. But we're praying for an early release for Kris, and we're praying that he has peace and comfort in his heart while he's there. And I'm very much encouraged by the things that I hear of the work that he's done for others while he's been incarcerated, and those that he's helped set free even while his is continually denied. There's a testimony to the character of the man in itself, and all that does is to hold him up in more light and show what a great man is. And there's the thing. Because I'm just sorry to go back again, but when George is talking about using the local media in your area, there's a guy who should have been free a long time ago, and in the midst of his battle is battling to get others free. That's a story in itself. Your love story, how you came back, all of these things. You need to not be afraid to allow the personalities of your relationships to come out. Don't be afraid of the media. Use it to your advantage, because believe you me, yours is a powerful story that I don't think a decent TV station would find hard to refuse.
Thank you.
All right. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining us. We're out of here for now.
Thanks, Kervin.
We'll catch up real soon. All right. God bless. Take care, people.
You too. Thank you both.
Bye-bye.
Do you like music like this?
Great music all the time.
Or like this?
The music you love.
Maybe this.
Great music that makes you want to turn up the volume loud.
or life chat like this.
Especially where human life is concerned. Surely, sooner or later, people will realize that lives actually matter.
Then you're in the right place. Keep it locked to World Jam Global, where music is harmony.
Music 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, I'm a World Jam. Hotter than them.
See live schedule.
Welcome to WorldJamRadio.com, where music is harmony. Our DJs transmitting from around the world. We provide ourselves with a mix of range of music and talk shows. We interact. Our chat room, allow members to interact with live DJs. We are available in all platforms, including TuneIn. We promote new talents, so please feel free. Send your demo to info@worldjamglobal.com. And if you didn't know, we welcome all new DJs who want to join our diverse team from any part of the world. So get connected, lock in.
This is Younger General, and you can listen to the Younger General's Mix by Mix show each and every Thursday between the hours of 7 and 9 on the World Jam Global. Listen.
World Jam Global.
Hi, my name is DJ Matt. Join me each and every Sunday for the old school reggae experience, the thing we call
Time tunnel.
between the hours of 12 and 3 each and every Sunday, all right, on the big one.
World Jam Global.
It's inspiring and uplifting, and it feels good to my soul. I start my Sunday mornings listening to Dr. Feel Good's Wake Up Everybody Sunday Gospel Show, exclusively on World Jam Global Radio, where music is harmony.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Well, there you heard it.
I already did my time. I paid
An absolutely unbelievable case. FreeKrisHelton.org. Spelled KrisHelton.
Did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for
25 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit, and only a procedural error keeps him in prison.
I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival.
Absolutely shocking.
Die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
I'll be back next week where my guest will be Sarah Clark.
I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
And this case that we're dealing with next week is right here in the UK.
Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can
Yeah, we're going to Bradford, Yorkshire
and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary.
next Saturday for another edition of Issues Today. And this is me, Kervin, Julien on World Jam Global Radio saying I'm out of here.
Not a man I could.
Thank you for joining me.
I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did